Hey everyone, Nick Genetakis here. In this video, let's take a look at finding and replacing text with Vim. As someone who's still pretty much a newcomer to Vim, I've only been using it now for about 5 months, I found certain find and replace things to be a little bit difficult compared to Sublime Text and VS Code. These are some basic things ranging from, finding things in one file, all the way to doing finding and replacing in multiple files using regular expressions. So in this video, we're going to tackle all of those use cases in between. And just as a heads up, we are going to create some custom mappings, and we are going to take a look at a couple of plugins to make the user experience a little bit nicer. I'm actually very happy with the end result. Now I find myself being able to do find and replace however I see fit in any project, and it's all great. So just to get started here, the first thing that we'll want to do is work with some type of project, right? We need a code base to start doing our finding and replacing on. So if you already have your own code base, that's fine. I'm just going to go ahead and clone my Build a SaaS app with Flask open source repo here that we can take a look at. And also, just as a preview to come, here's a couple of tabs up here that we are going to cover in this video. So now that I copied that, I am going to clone that to my dev box. And then I will open it up in Vim. All right, here we go. And then we'll just get started. By the way, I am using the fzf plugin to do fuzzy file finding on files. And we'll get into that too, because that is a component of one of the plugins that we're going to use. So one of the most basic things that you'll want to do in Vim when it comes to jumping to a specific word in a line, which is kind of finding, it's like finding a specific word in a line, is to use the F key in normal mode, followed by whatever character you want to jump to. So you can do F capital S, and that just jumps to the word SaaS here because that's the first capital S in the line. If you're using the mouse like me, sometimes just clicking that is a little bit easier. I tend to do whichever more natural at the time. It's not like a black and white decision. So just to demonstrate that again, F key, lowercase w, that'll jump me to the width here. And you can also do capital F, lowercase t, and that'll search in reverse to the first character that you decide to search for. Another interesting bind that you might use is the T bind, which is very similar to F, where if I do T capital S, it puts me, until the character, like basically one character before. Kind of speeding through all this stuff because we have a lot to cover. Also, sometimes like if you're just finding things in a file, typically what you want to do like after you find something is maybe replace it with some other word, right? So what I find too is like if I want to go to the beginning of the line now, capital I brings you into insert mode at the start of the line, and capital A brings you into insert mode at the end of the line. Combine that with the F movement and T movement that we just used before, and you can find things and jump to it very quickly in one line. But now let's talk about finding things in an entire file. So if you do / and you just start typing for the phrase that you want to find, in this case the word the, notice how it's doing a real-time highlight as I type, and I believe that feature was introduced in Vim 8. I'm not really sure, don't really keep up too much with the changelog, but once you hit enter there, then Vim will highlight all the matches, and now you can hit the N key to cycle between all the matches that you want. And then when you hit the bottom of the file, Vim's going to be like, hey, we hit the bottom, I'm going to continue back on the top, and it keeps cycling through. Or you can do Shift N, which does that in reverse, where you'll just start finding your matches in reverse instead of forward. Also, instead of using / to do a search, you can use the question mark and do a search as well. And that basically just searches in reverse by default instead of forward. So I'm hitting N now, but I'm actually going in reverse. Whereas if I hit Shift N now, I am going forward because I used the question mark to do a search. So that's pretty much a pretty fast way to search for text in a file. This comes up pretty often in the real world, day-to-day development, stuff like that. So I'm going to cheat here a little bit with the mouse, but let's say that you wanted to jump to that 15 here in 15 stages, but your mouse cursor or your cursor is over here, and let's just say that your hand's nowhere near the mouse. So what you can do is just do / 15 enter, and boom, you're right there on the spot to where you want to go to. Great. But now let's focus a little bit more on, well, actually, before we go into replacing text, if you've actually used Vim before, and you notice here that I did a search for the, like as soon as I move my mouse cursor up, down, left, or right, that search highlight goes away. And that's actually not a default behavior of Vim. That is a custom plugin. So let's take a look here at the plugin, and that is incremental search improved. And here's the GitHub repo for it, and all the links will be in the description as mentioned before, I think. So what it does, part of what it does is it automatically clears the search highlights. And there's like an animated GIF here that shows you what we just saw. It's very, very handy because I find 99% of the time after doing a search, as soon as I move my cursor, I actually want the search highlight to go away. I don't want to have to like manually get rid of it. So actually, let me just open up my vim-rc file here, and I'll show you how that is installed. What was it? I think it's ink search, was it? Nope. What was that guy's name? I think it was in that Vim plugin. Well, that's not really going to help. Well, we can see here I'm using, I just used the // to do a find here, but in this case, I actually don't remember the exact plugin name because that's how short term my memory is. So we have to find it manually. There it is, incremental search.vim. So if you want to install it in your vim-rc file, I'm using the plugin manager. I recommend using that. If you don't, you'll have to use yours. But yeah, pop that into your vim-rc file, and you'll be good to go for automatically clearing search highlights. Now, let's go back to finding and replacing text in a file. So one way to do this in Vim is, if you do %s and then the word that you want to search for and the word that you want to replace, like let's say we want to replace the word the with foobar, and we'll do that globally. Globally meaning like if the word the were to be on one line multiple times, it will replace all of them instead of just the first instance. And if you do that, then, and then jump back up to the top of the file here, you'll see that foobar is now the replacement for the, right? Pretty straightforward. I mean, you got to type all of this out to make that work. And just to repeat that, let's bring it back to the. Well, actually, even better, I'll just hit the U key to undo that change, and we're back to normal. But I mean, having to type all this out or whatever, that's not that fun. So there is a pretty nice key binding with Vim that's built in, where if you just put your cursor over the word that you want to highlight and search for, you can just hit Shift 8, which is the asterisk, right? And now it just did a search for the word under my cursor, which is fantastic. So now if I were to do a replacement, I actually have a custom key binding set up now where if I do leader R, now I can just type in my replacement. Notice how, okay, so it put me exactly here in the bottom left. So I can just type my replacement. And now if I jump back to the top of the file, we can see here that the foobar was replaced. And I can undo that. And just to repeat that again, and we're going to go over the custom bindings in a second here. Let's say I'm over the word the, I do Shift 8, and that selects everything. And then I just do leader R, and I just start typing the word that I want to replace. And boom, it's been replaced, and it's great, right? Whoops, I wanted to undo that change. Yeah. Okay, so that is actually happening due to a custom key binding in Vim. And, that is in my dot files here. And if I do a search for, I forget what mapping it is, something with replacing. Yeah, here we go. Press auto search. Yes, it's this one here. So we're doing a normal mode map here. I do leader R because leader R feels like replace, right? Pretty straightforward, I guess. And what it really just does is it enters this command in for you, and the left at the end, just places the mouse cursor like left. So the mouse cursor ends up being actually left like that. The mouse cursor will end up being, in between the /. And if you don't know this about Vim, so if you do a search and replace like this, where you don't put in the term that you're searching for, then it'll actually just use the highlighted search result that's been found by Vim. So that works out really great when we do the Shift 8 there, because now the is like the highlighted term. So if we just do like this with the // like no search term, it's just going to replace the with whatever word that we want. And we can also pop in a C at the end here if we want to confirm each one. may be useful in some cases. I actually have two separate key bindings for that. If I actually go back to here, we can see if I do leader RC, that does the same exact thing as this one, except it just drops in the C at the end, and it does one more left because we have one more character. So no plugins required here, just a custom key binding. Finding and replacing things in one file is quite nice. And there's other things we can do here too. So if we take a look here at the key bindings again, instead of a normal mapping, now we have like a visual mapping as well. I think actually my terminology on like X no remap or whatever, I'm not well versed enough in Vim to explain these, but let me just demonstrate how it actually works. So let's say that you wanted to replace the word course, right? That's super simple. It's just one word, you hit the Shift 8 and you're good to go. But what happens when you want to actually do a replacement on something like where we build, like that entire phrase? You can't just do Shift 8 over here because then it's going to only capture the where. But what we really want to do is like somehow make that our search term. And actually, I don't think, that's not going to really be defined in this file more than once. So what could I do here? Let's see. Well, I guess I can just visually select the. So I'm using, I hit V there to visually select. And now I just visually selected the word the. And I'm going to hit the same exact key binding, like the Shift 8 there. And now that did a highlight for the word the. But it's much different than just hitting Shift 8 over the word itself. Because theoretically, if I did the course and I did Shift 8, well, there we go. That's a great example. It was able to find another instance of that in the file. So if I do N there, the course, apparently that's been written a couple of times in this file. So what we could do now is do the leader R just like before. And maybe I want to replace the course with the trampoline, right? Why not? In caps. And now the course is the trampoline. And that was able to do that on a phrase, not just a specific word. And if I jump back over to my vim-rc file, that is responsible for this. Now, using that, being able to hit, actually, let me undo that trampoline change there. Being able to do that with a visual selection and then being able to hit the asterisk like that, that is not out of the box Vim behavior. That does require a plugin, and that plugin is Vim Visual Star Search. So, and also it's worth mentioning, let's not get into the pound symbol for now. If you know Vim, you know what that does. We're just going to focus on the star. But anyways, let me go back to my vim-rc file because this is going to be something we need to install. So if I do a search for Visual Star Search, there we go, I jumped right to it. And this is the plugin that we want. And once we have that installed, you'll be able to do the visual search, and we can also do the replacement that we just saw. Pretty nice. Now, actually, if I go back to here, where was that? Control O a couple times. Yeah, so the replacement here, I think I misspoke. This is more for just doing a replacement on the visual selection instead of all of the entire file, which is another pretty common thing you'd want to do as a developer. So let's say that, you have the word the highlighted everywhere, right? And we want to replace the word the with something else, but we don't want to do it on the full file. What we actually want to do is maybe just do it, up to here, let's say, right? So we can do that. And now as this visual thing is selected, we have a visual selection. Now I can do my leader R, and then I can just do, capital foobar. And we can see now that, we have a capital foobar here, here, and here, but the other ones did not change. So that behavior is actually thanks to this key binding here, instead of, the visual star search. That is unrelated, but that is something that is useful. But let me go and undo that a couple of times here. In case you couldn't tell, unscripted video, a lot of new stuff going on here. But yeah, so that's finding text in a file, finding text in just the visual selection, being able to replace things in a full file, being able to replace things just in a visual selection. But then there's another use case, which you may have done in Sublime Text or Visual Studio Code, where you did multiple cursors to replace a couple of instances of your search phrase. And this comes up all the time in development, and Vim has an answer for that too. Although personally, I don't use multiple cursors. So I'm actually going to jump ahead a little bit here. I'm actually using a tool called ripgrep here to do a search for, and this is a Python project, by the way, so I'm going to do a search for def, because that's how you define functions in Python. And we're going to go over how this multi-file search just worked in a little bit. But I just want to go to some file here. I don't know, I just want to go over an example of like refactoring some function that you might do in a real project. So like in this case, we have this list commands function here. And I don't know, let's just say for whatever reason, we want to replace the word commands here, this variable, with something else. Maybe we'll just rename that to cmds, which would be a pretty bad refactor because it makes it a little bit harder to understand what it is, but it will demonstrate how to do this. So what I could do here is, while I'm over the word, I just do s asterisks. Well, hold on. Sorry about that. What I just do is s asterisks. I had to do a little bit faster. I'm not used to narrating my thought process here. And then just change that to commands, hit escape, and now I can use Vim's dot command to repeat that command any number of times. So I can just do it once, twice, and 3 times. And now it just repeated it 3 times, and I can undo those changes as well. Or I can redo them, or I can undo them. And it'll continue, if I keep hitting the dot more than 3 times, it'll just go to the next one and the next one. But, that's a pretty nice way, I think, to step through like the workflow of doing multiple it's sort of like multiple cursors, but it's not, right? Because like in Visual Studio Code, you probably would have like did that, and then what's the hotkey? It's been so long now, like Control D or something like that, and it would have selected the next one and the next one and the next one. But instead of doing that, we just do what we want to do, and then boom, boom, boom. So like once you get used to doing the hotkeys for that, it's actually comparably as fast to using multiple cursors. And also, one cool thing is like, let's say you do that, and now you do the replacement, and then you can just hit N, like to jump to the next one, and then hit dot there and dot there to repeat the commands. But notice how this one here, because I used next to go over it, allows you to skip certain variables that you may not want to rename, or whatever you're trying to rename. So that's basically like the multiple cursors use case without needing multiple cursors. Because I did try using the Vim plugin for multiple cursors, and it was just really, 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 really slow. Like it made redrawing things like, it took like 5 full seconds just to see like a character change when I typed, which is no good. But going back to what we just did with the dot operator, let me just undo those commands here. That's not a well, it is built into Vim, but I am using a custom key binding just to make this a little bit nicer. So, and when I say my key binding here, like I did not come up with this. Someone did on Reddit, or maybe it was a blog post I searched for. It's been a while. But the idea here is, in normal mode, we just do, the S key followed by the asterisks, and then all of this crazy stuff happens, which I'm not going to even bother trying to explain. CGN is the magic sauce, I guess, to make it work. Again, I'm not well versed enough in Vim to really explain how that works, but it works. And then there's also the same mapping for visual mode, so we can do this on a phrase as well. So if I go back to here, this is going to be a tricky one. I'm trying to find like an example of where we can do with a phrase. Well, whatever, I can just visually select that and then do that. And, it works just as it did before, but it's doing it on a visual phrase. So if we wanted to actually select multiple things and do the replacement, that would have worked just fine. So yeah, this is something I use, I don't want to say all the time, but very often, like frequently for sure, like multiple times a day. Quite handy. So that takes care of like pretty much dealing with finding and replacing stuff in one file. So the next topic to tackle would be, doing finding and replacing in multiple files, because that comes up quite a lot as a developer. So like if you're refactoring some functions or whatever you want to do, it usually involves multiple files. So let's go over that. And we'll begin by going over searching in multiple files. And we're just going to jump right into installing a whole bunch of plugins for this, mainly fzf, fzf.vim, and also installing a system package called ripgrep. When I did that rg command before, that's what that is. That's ripgrep. And basically what it allows you to do, and we'll take a look at how it works before we go down the path of installing all of this stuff, you can do a search for, whatever you want. Like, let's do a search for file name, right? And it's going to search all of the files in this Vim instance. Like, let me actually quit all of this. Okay, I got to quit all of it. Exclamation point. So, I opened up Vim in this build a SaaS app with Flask folder, and now I'm doing the search for file name, and it's actually, it's going to search this entire build a SaaS app with Flask folder for the word file name, or in this case, the term file name. And then when it finds a match, you can hit the up and down arrows to go to whichever match that you want. So like, okay, let's go to this one. And then it brings you right to it, which is great. In addition to that, you can see here that it did a search for file name, and it found matches in Python files, but also HTML files. And well, actually, before we get into that, let me just also point out that let's say that you have the file open already, and you wanted to open up a different file, like this one instead. So what you could do here is you can just do Control V, and that'll open it up in a vertical split right next to the other file that you had open, and it brings you right to it, which is quite handy. If you do another search here for file name, and instead of doing a vertical split, you can also do, and by the way, I did that with Control V to open that vertical split. You can also do Control X, which will open it up in a horizontal split. So depending on, how you like your windows oriented, you can do that. And there's even one more too, where if you do a search for this, and like, let's say you wanted to open up this one, you can do Control T, and that actually opens it up in a new tab. I use tabs quite a bit, but I don't use them for individual files. Like maybe I'll have, well, I actually did a whole video on tabs, pane, and buffers with Tmux and Vim, so you may want to check that out. But, you have the option of opening these files however you see fit, in the current buffer, vertically split, horizontally split, or in tabs. And you can actually even, you can mark these files too by doing Shift Tab on them. Notice there's that little orange icon there now. And if I do a Shift Tab again, and then Shift Tab again, and then I do Control X, it's actually going to open them all up in horizontal splits, which is pretty cool. Comes in handy to open up multiple files. Also, that quick fix window did pop up, and I hid that for a second here, but we'll go into that when we start talking about replacing text in multiple files. But before we get into that, we need to really set up, like, how did this rg command work? And another really cool thing about this command too is if you put in no arguments at all, then it'll actually find every single line in your whole entire project, 2075 lines. Keep in mind, this is like a trimmed down version of what's in the course. Like this is just the open source version. But now it's like you have this real-time filter. So like if you wanted to do a search for file name, like you can just start searching and it's going to find all those matches across your whole entire project, which is pretty sweet. I use that once in a while when I'm not really too sure what I want to search for, but I can see it getting narrowed down in real time, which is pretty cool. Another option too is, we've been searching for file name, but Python matches come up, HTML matches come up. But let's say that you just want to narrow this down to Python matches. So what you can do is you can just do the -G flag, which is a ripgrep flag for, I think, globbing or something like that. And you can just, and it's important to put it in quotes here, you can do star.py for just Python file matches. And now, all those HTML matches are gone. Or if you wanted to change that to be HTML instead, now we have the HTML ones. And you can really enter in, any ripgrep flags that you want. Although that behavior doesn't come out of the box with the plugin that we're using. I had to make a custom command for that. But now let's go over some other things we can do with fzf.vim. just before we go over installing it all, because I understand, installing a whole bunch of different plugins, it's kind of, it takes a lot of effort to get all that set up. So just to make sure, you're interested in using these plugins, like here's some other functionality that you get too. So you can do Control P. Again, this is like a custom bind I set up to be Control P, but it uses the FZF plugin to where you can do a fuzzy search on whatever, on file names, which is quite handy. So there's a whole bunch of other stuff too. You can do like lines. I don't have that bound to a key. Well, actually, let me do lines like file name. In this case, it'll just find all the matches here, and then you can hit enter on them to jump right to it. The difference between using lines instead of the / to do a find is lines will actually search all of your open buffers instead of just the current buffer. But there's also B-lines to do that as well, just the current buffer. But in that case, you might as well just use /. But these are all handy things that the FZF Vim plugin does. And if you actually have Vim Fugitive installed, you can even do commits here, and you can see a commit log of your project. And actually, it should actually show a preview for that. That might be because my font size was a little bit too big to show that. So let me see what happens now. Yeah, there we go. And I will bump up the font in a second. But as I cycle through these git commits, we can actually see a diff there on the right. Pretty nice way just to go through your commits. So let me go and make this a little bit bigger now, just so we can see this better. That's just basically a taste of what the FZF Vim plugin can do. So actually, there's a whole bunch of different stuff here we can do. Like this files command is what I map to Control P, but you can do like get files and buffers, like color schemes, and you can search your history and commands and maps. Like it's quite useful. So now let's go over getting all this set up, because it is quite a bit of work. But when I say quite a bit of work, I mean like you'll be set up in like 5 minutes in this video. So number one is getting FZF installed. So you can just go to GitHub, JuneGun, FZF. Again, link will be in the description. And I like installing it using git. So you would just copy this command here, and that is going to git clone it to your home directory under FZF. And then you have to run this FZF install command, which I think just writes something to your bash RC file, maybe sets up some binaries. To be honest, I'm not that sure. But let me go back over here. I'll just open up a new thing here, and I'll show you my bash RC file, because you'll have to make this change as well if it didn't already do it for the installation. Well, let's ignore this FZF default command for now, and we'll just focus on this one. Like this is just getting FZF installed. So make sure your bash RC file, or I guess ZSH file if you're using that instead of bash, make sure it has this line, and make sure these paths line up to where they need to be. I think I used home instead of tilde just to be more explicit. I like to use environment variables there for scripting, but I think by default I might put a tilde there. But either way, not that important. Just make sure you have the line in here, and also restart your terminal after that. Otherwise, well, alternatively, you can source the file instead of doing closing it and opening it up again. So that is how you get FZF installed. But then we actually need to install the FZF Vim plugin. So the way to do that is, you can just drop these two plug lines into your vim-rc file. The first plug line references where you have Vim FZF installed to, which is worth pointing out, because if you go back to this plugin here, if you were to have installed FZF using Homebrew or something else, then FZF would be here instead of in your home directory. It's in the home directory because we use the git installation. And then, this other line here is just referencing this plugin that we're looking at here, which is exactly what you see here in my vim-rc file. So once you have all of that installed, now you have FZF installed, now you have FZF Vim installed. There are a couple of things that I've done in my vim-rc file just to make it a little bit nicer. Like for example, Control P, I'm so used to that from Sublime Text and VS Code. So I mapped FZF, which is really files, I believe, to Control P. And then a couple other ones that I like to use pretty frequently, like the lines one, searches all buffers for a specific search phrase. And then as well as buffers, I didn't show that one, but if you do buffers here, it just gives you a list of all of your open buffers, and then you can just hit the number. You can open the one that you want to open. So let me go back to here. And also, This is very important. Almost forgot this one. So, and I know we can't really try this out yet because we didn't install a ripgrep, but by default, fzf.vim, when you run the rg command, it does not allow you to enter in rg flags because it does some like shell escaping or whatever. So I asked for some help, I think on Reddit or I Googled or whatever, and someone came up with this custom command that allows you to actually be able to search for, specific file types or whatever RG flags that you want. So you want to make sure that you have that custom command installed. So now that FCF and FCF-vim is installed, let's go over installing ripgrep because there is a little bit of configuration that we still need to do. So ripgrep is not a Vim plugin. This will work outside of Vim as well. Pretty popular. I like this guy's name, Burnt Sushi. But anyways, depending on what operating system you have or distribution of Linux, there's like 8,000 different ways to install ripgrep, but this is for Arch, this is for Gentoo, Fedora, blah, blah, blah. So if you're on Windows WSL like me, then you can find the Debian installer here, which is just a Debian package that you curl down and then you install it. And now you have ripgrep installed. Pretty straightforward. If you're using Mac OS, whatever, it's in here, brew install it, and you're good to go. So now that we have ripgrep installed, we need to do a little bit more configuration. So in the bash rc file, you want to make sure this line is here where you export this fcf default command. And this will actually work outside of Vim too, because FCF, you can use Control R to reverse search your history. And we're just telling it to use this command by default. Basically this, RG is ripgrep, and we have all these flags here. We want to ignore .git folders by default. And once we have all of that set up, I don't think there's any other additional things that you really need. That's just like a minor thing. So we'll go into that in a second. But yeah, I believe that is everything you need to have ripgrep, FCF, and FCF-vim all working in harmony. So once you have all of those things installed, all of the bash rc file changes made, close your terminal, open your terminal, come back to Vim, and then you should be able to run RG and then do a search for, whatever you want to search for. It should be a valid command. Likewise, like the FCF command, same thing as Control P, depending on if you decided to use those bindings. So now that we have all of that set up, now you know how to search all of your files in a project very quickly. You can just do a search for whatever. You can also do, limit it to Python files and pick whatever you want. Great. So the last thing that we're going to cover here is doing a find replace on multiple files. And for that, we're going to be using a new plugin called vim-grepper. And by new, I mean we haven't gone over it yet, but it's been around for quite a while. But before we get into installing that plugin, let me just quickly demonstrate how it works. So let's say that you're working in some Python project or whatever, doesn't matter what you're working on, and you want to replace the word param with something else, and you want that to happen across your entire project. So with this plugin combined with a custom keybind that I have set up, I can just do leader Shift R. And Shift R to me has special meaning because it's like replace, but it's like not just replace, it's replace. Whoa, I just shook the whole entire apartment. But you get the idea. Like it's replacing, but replacing on multiple things. So as soon as I hit that hotkey, a quick fix window was opened up. And we can see all of the matches in that quick fix window. And in addition to that, the cursor was moved right into the spot where we need to type to do the replacement. Now, I'm pretty much, a total newbie at Vim still, so quick fix list and all this functionality is still quite new to me. But to my best of understanding, cfdo is some command that you can run that basically allows you to do a find and replace or whatever action that you want to do and have it apply to every single file in this quick fix list. And at the very end here, we're doing a pipe update, which means after we do the replacement, which by the way is just like we did early on in this video where we did a replacement, right? After the replacement is done, then it's going to do an update, which basically writes the file out. So let's say that we have the word param, and for whatever reason, we want to update to be the word water. So I would just hit enter now, and 2 seconds later, not even, all instances of the word param were replaced with water. So if I go and open up, well, actually, let me just do a search for capital water here. We can see now we have all of these instances of water. So let me just go to this conf test file over here. Pretty strange. I have no idea why that wasn't syntax colored, but whatever. Anyways, there's our word water, right? And now if I were to do leader shift R and maybe replace water with param, which it should be, and rerun that, it's like now I just put it back to be param, and it's like nothing ever changed. And we don't need to save the file because it's already been saved thanks to the pipe update at the end. So, you know, this functionality is really brought to you by vim-grepper, which puts things, you know, the search term that you have into the quick fix list. And then the custom bind that I have set up is what allows it all to be hooked up to where you just do, you know, leader shift R and it all just works. So another thing you could do too, instead of just doing it for a specific word, you know, maybe you want to do it for a phrase or possibly a regular expression. Now, I'll admit, I haven't come up with a great way to solve this problem yet. If you know of a better way, please let me know in the comments. But the way I currently do it now is I actually just use the rg command, and then I would do a search for, you know, whatever I want to replace. This is going to be a weird one because it's like, okay. Well, I guess a good example would be like from Snake Eyes. Like maybe I want to replace from Snake Eyes with something else. So what I would do is I would use ripgrep using the fzf vim plugin, which is what we're doing here. Then I would quote my search term and do from Snake Eyes. And once I have that typed out, I could also optionally, you know, limit this to Python files, which would be a pretty good idea. And we can see here we have the output of, you know, here's all of the matches that we have. Now, what you could do now, remember how we did Shift Tab before to mark individual files? Well, you can actually do Alt A, which will mark all the files, and then hit Enter, and now it just adds all of the files to the quick fix list. And now we have the quick fix list ready to go. We can actually go and run that cfdo command. Cfdo, what was it? Parentheses S. And then we actually have to type in what we want to replace. So from Snake Eyes with, I don't know, like, yay, maybe, globally. And then we also will do the pipe update. And let me double check the syntax. CFDO, yes, replace from Snake Eyes with yay, globally, update. And if we do enter here, you know, now it actually did do that, right? Like this is clearly a pretty silly replacement, but it worked. And the interesting thing about doing this setup is like, well, you know, now it doesn't need to be a specific word under the cursor. It could be a phrase, but it could also be regular expression, like whatever you want to type in here, you would actually do. And what we're really doing here is we're using, you know, RG to populate the quick fix list with that Alt A hitting enter trick. And then we're just using the CFDO command to do what we want. So it is a little bit more typing because I haven't quite figured out how to get vim-grepper, or I haven't figured out how to make a custom hotkey, which we'll take a look at here. Like I haven't figured out how to get this to work with kind of like the way the visual star worked. Like, yeah, obviously I didn't make this key binding. I was Googling around and I found this solution and it worked great. So I used it. But yeah, anyways, when you want to do a replacement on more than just a word or a regular expression, that's the workflow to do. Sort of a little bit annoying, but you know, that's not something I tend to do that often. So I don't mind it being not the best. Although maybe there is a better way to do it. I just haven't figured it out. So now let's get into installing vim-grepper. To do that, it is over here somewhere. Yep, we just install the plugin here. Actually, let me just open up on GitHub. We can see here, pretty popular library. Once we have it installed, it actually uses a number of different backends that you could configure to do the searching. So in our case, we're going to be using ripgrep, but actually you could use grep or ag, which is also worth mentioning if you're using ag already, which is the silver searcher, something I've actually never used, but I know it's pretty popular. So this JuneGun, FCF Vim plugin, I've been running the RG command, but if you're super happy using Silver Searcher instead, you can just replace that with the AG command, and you will be good to go. So, now that we have vim-grepper installed, just like we have here, we need to go to my .files here, which also will be in the description. And there's a couple of things that we need to configure. So we will tell it to use ripgrep as the backend, and we need to set up this custom map because that was in the blog post that I read. I believe it needs to be set up because this bind actually uses it. Does it? I don't know. Maybe not, actually. Yeah, I don't know where this came from. I think I tried to do a visual selection one once and totally failed, but that used this. But yeah, in either case, you will need this. And that allows you to do the shift or leader shift R to do the replacement for vim-grepper. Now, vim-grepper is also something you can run as a command itself. So if you run like grepper here and hit enter, and then did a search for something like def or whatever, it'll populate the quick fix list. And then, you can run the cfdo command like that if you wanted to. And that's really why I use vim-grepper most of the time when I do replacements. It's because you can programmatically do searches. So that it really allows us to set up this key map here. I haven't figured out a way to do this with the RG command with vim-fcf, because it would be pretty interesting if you can get rid of vim-grepper and just use RG with, vim-fcf without vim-grepper. Yeah, I don't know. That's beyond my knowledge. So I don't know how to set all of that up, if it's even possible. But yeah, that's pretty much the whole setup of many, many different use cases of finding and replacing text with Vim. We've gone through a lot in this video, everything from finding text in one line all the way to doing replacements with a regular expression on multiple files in a project. So that's pretty much my setup. If you know of a better way or ways to improve it, please leave a comment. If you like the video, you can like it, do whatever you want. And thanks a lot for watching. This was a long one, and I will see you in the next video.